9th August 2022, the people of the Republic of Kenya exercised their powers enshrined in Article 1 of the 2010 Constitution and went ahead to elect their leader in a highly contested election between the Kenya Kwanza camp, led by Deputy President William Ruto, and the Azimio la Umoja camp, led by Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Well, this election was highly contested, and we clearly saw the outcomes of the election. It was a very narrow margin. This led to 8 presidential election petitions being filed in the Supreme Court. Well, we know that as of this week, Monday, the Lady Justice Martha Koome-led Supreme Court went ahead to deliver a ruling. And we know that the presidential election petition was struck out, all the issues were dismissed, but now we are here to evaluate what does this mean for Kenya's jurisprudence, but also what does it mean for their politics moving forward. We shall do this examination vis-a-vis comparing with what lessons are there for the region, what we need to learn as a country. That is phase 1. Colleagues, phase 2, we know that next month we are moving towards the independence month of this country, and therefore we shall examine our 60 years of independence, but we shall focus more on the political gains and challenges that we have made as a country, and that shall consume phase 2 of our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Youth Roundtable. Of course, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. That is now my pleasure to introduce to you. From my extreme left is the Alliance for National Transformation youth leader, counsel, and comrade and friend of the Youth Roundtable, Mr. Nelson Agaba. Many thanks for joining us. Say hello to our viewers.
Pleasure being hosted once again. Thank you.
All right, very brief. Yes, next to Nelson is a friend of mine, Esther Asingwire. Esther is a former contestant for the National Female Youth Member of Parliament position in the most recently concluded general elections. Esther, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Honorable. Hello, our viewers. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, many thanks. I will introduce the gentleman last. Well, next to me and next to the gentleman is Preta Namasaba. Preta is a student of law at Makerere University. Preta is also a first time on the Youth Roundtable. Many thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, you want to say hello to our viewers this afternoon?
Hello to the viewers. It's a pleasure to be on this show.
All right, thank you, Preta. Next to Preta, and in the middle of us all is Ivan Sébastien Ssegawa. Ivan is a former youth ambassador to the East African community, but also I know that he was part of the EAC election observation mission that went to Kenya to observe this election. Many thanks for joining us, good sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Comrade Kidega. I'm also happy to appear with these distinguished panelists today. Happy to see how this conversation unfolds.
Yeah, many thanks. And I think in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, karibuni sana. Welcome to the Youth Roundtable, all of you guys. Well, Nelson, let me just begin with you for obvious reasons. The Supreme Court decision, 9 issues were raised. I'm sure you've braced your mind to some of these issues. But is it peculiar, is it unique that the highest appellate court in the land can strike out all 9 issues unanimously, 7 judges all agreeing, no dispute? I don't know, is that peculiar or it's normal?
Thank you, Kidega, and viewers this afternoon. Just to be brief, rulings or judgments of courts are based or determined by the evidences that are adduced by the parties, to the matter before court. So that's why they normally say courts are moved by the parties. And courts, not only the parties, but by the adduced evidence, by both parties. So the role or the most role of court is to evaluate the evidence adduced to it by the parties and take a decision as informed, by the evaluation they have made. So it is something that can happen. You don't say, because I'm in court, you just give uncredible evidence and you expect to have a ruling in your favor or expect to have probably dissenting judge or magistrate, whatever case may be. So,
because speaking of evidence,
that's something that has to be, and also for all rulings, we all had to follow the ruling, the summary judgment by the Chief Justice of Kenya. There is what we call the ratio disdendi in any matter or in any decision or ruling. The ratio disdendi is a Latin word meaning the reasoning behind
the decision.
So when you look at you cannot give any judgment without a reason, without a justification. So it's one thing that we have to say. Can we say for whatever was presented probably was credible and they found it not to be justifiable to say probably one issue or two issues would be upheld. So courts are moved by the parties through adducing evidence. So it is the evaluation of the evidences that informs the determination of court.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Peace, let me just come to you as we just explore the legal question a little bit. He has mentioned the aspect of evidence, and I agree with him that the law of evidence is enshrined on the principle of he who alleges must prove, right? And Raila Odinga, being a petitioner in this case, he was alleging all these, offenses, and the burden of proof fell on him. So, because from what we saw there was a whole lorry, carried into Supreme Court, with so many boxes. Are we saying that all those boxes, the evidence therein did not convince court? Is it possible that the evidence was just, I don't know, not sufficient enough?
Well, thank you for that question. Carrying loads of documents and boxes of papers does not mean that the evidence adduced is going to sway the court. In this incident, we see that there was a case of forgery whereby the Chief Justice mentioned that some of the witnesses called by the petitioners actually perjured themselves before the court, that lots of lies were told. So the fact that there were lots of documents brought into the court doesn't mean that that evidence is substantive. It does not mean that all those documents are going to sway the court. The petitioners failed to prove on all the 8 issues that there was election rigging and that the process didn't follow the guidelines. The evidence that they brought before the court was not enough to sway the court. And we have seen in these kinds of constitutional court cases where there are during election petitions, they use the substantive tests. You can see in 2016 in Uganda, the court said there was election rigging. The process was improper. But to what extent? Is this rigging enough for the court to overthrow the decision that they can have a by-election? But in this case, that didn't happen. There was no need for a substantive test because the evidence adduced could not prove any of the 8 issues alleged.
Okay, fair enough.
I think with Uganda, there was no rigging like you mentioned it. It was just an imagination of the opposition.
The court found that there was rigging, but it wasn't enough to overturn the election.
It wasn't sufficient enough. Well, thank you. Seba, let me come to you. You were on ground. Unlike many of us, you were on ground as this election was happening. You witnessed the enthusiasm. You witnessed the voter turnout. You witnessed Kenyans exercising their constitutional mandate, their civic duty. In your own view, do you think that the outcomes of this election were in tandem with what you saw on the ground? Was there fair play or was there foul play? Was there sportsmanship?
Thank you. Maybe before I answer your question, I want to have a contribution towards the conversation about the decision of the Supreme Court.
Sure.
I dare say that the Kenyan situation is unique, and this is after the 2010 Constitution Amendment, which of course was informed by the post-electoral violence of 2007.
Yeah.
And the uniqueness is both probably a challenge to the petitioner and maybe a blessing, because then the Constitution says the president doesn't swear when his election has been challenged,
Yes.
which is not the case for very many countries. Which ideally would mean that the petitioner is not running against an incumbent or petitioning against an incumbent, but it also gives them a small window to present their case with all the facts, all the evidence, or the lack of. And it also gives court a limited time to hear that case. But the beauty there is that, like you say, that the burden of proof is usually on the petitioner. But the Kenyan law shifts that the moment court approves that the petition is worth hearing, then, and if it's an electoral petition, a presidential electoral petition, the burden of proof shifts from the petitioner to the IEBC, the independent electoral and boundaries body. So you would realize that for those of us that had the opportunity to follow the case more keenly, I am not a legal mind, so I do not want to go into the Latin legal jargons. Yeah, but you would realize that IEBC had the burden to prove that they actually acted as per the constitution. Yeah. Yes, the petitioner did, of course, fall short according to the judgment of a couple of things. But I think the beauty that brings that then becomes that the person you gave the mandate needs to prove that they executed it, not exactly just wait to defend themselves. And I hope that that principle, it would be nice to be spread around, at least within East Africa, that the people we charge with power, with mandate to run our elections, have the burden to prove that they did the right thing, not sit at the rebuttal end, say when they are challenged. But when we argue about whether the will of the people was reflected, we were in Nairobi for the observer mission for 2 weeks, a fortnight, but we had a long-term observer mission that, of course, needed to assess the pre-electoral engagements, mostly the how the ground was playing out during campaigns. And I can say that, and I think very many panelists have been sharing this, that almost all parties that and candidates that were contesting did not have any blockages, any major blockages, or even any arrests. There were no arbitrary arrests of the candidates that were running, depending on which side of the aisle that you are, whether you're pro-government or against it. That was one. But also the process that IEBC had put in place to run this election, because it was following recommendations from court in 2017 when court overturned the elections, were that the election was supposed to be held in a hybrid nature. And of course, the element of bringing in technology was to provide for some level of transparency, but also to guarantee some level of auditing. That, you know, when we go manual, sometimes you might not audit who is moving what where. But when you go electronic, and electronic, when you have very many witnesses, then sometimes it might be challenging for someone to compromise the system. But even if they did, there are avenues for us to audit that process. And all these preparations had all parties involved participate. And of course, we know that there are some things, printing ballots. Our colleague from NT will tell you that probably in 2020, they were sent to whichever, in Dubai, when Uganda was printing our ballots. They had agents there. It was the same for Kenya, that all participating political parties sent agents to every process. And when we, because we had a session where we interacted with all presidential candidates, all the 4 camps, and you would realize that all of them were part and parcel of the processes that IEBC was undertaking. And even when they mentioned, I heard in the case that they were concerned about the KPMG audit report, because I think that's the other thing, that they had their voter register audited by an independent firm that was not government or the commission itself. That IEBC did so much to prove to Kenyans that here, look, we are making sure everyone is on board with the system that we are providing, and we are trying to be as transparent as we can. Even when it came to election day, and I don't want to speak for the whole of Kenya, because I was posted in just a particular county, which is Taita Taveta towards Tanzania. You realize that again, one thing we need to borrow from them, and that's something we don't do here, is that when people are done casting their vote, they go home. In Uganda, I think it's because we probably do not have as much trust, much confidence in the commission, that people to stay to quote unquote guard their vote, even in the process of agents. But you'd realize that people really
I think with that statement, it's the political leaders that influence them, because if you remember, the opposition leader was telling our people, you remain on the polling station. So it is the political leaders who may determine if people will trust the system or not. Because in Uganda, our people remained on the polling station because the presidential candidate was compelling them to remain on the polling station. He was telling them, remain on the polling station. So because they have trust in him and they obey what he says, they had to do that.
That is one way to view it, although it's fair to say that it is enshrined in the political law for both Kenya, even Tanzania, because I also had the opportunity to observe the 2020 Tanzanian election.
You really observed.
So you find that people come, they cast their vote, and they trust that their agents are going to do a good job to protect that vote. And I think that it is that level of appreciation and confidence in the system that goes a long way to give citizens the confidence that what is being declared is indeed what they decided through the ballot. Maybe to conclude, I would conclude with voter turnout. Where I was, you would find that you had a turnout of about 80%, but of course you would account for people who probably were dead, and or people who maybe did not have the voter apathy to come through and cast their vote. But it was fair. If you have about anything beyond 60%, you celebrate.
Okay.
Mostly because lastly,
fair enough. I want to bring in Esther.
There was very poor, like I think the only shortfall they had as IEBC was voter education, that they did not do enough campaigns. Even when you followed their TV stations, the local stations, they were fronting the candidates more than they were fronting the encouragement or the knowledge about
the issues around.
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Esther, I want to bring you in. And we have all seen Kenya's electoral process, right from the campaigns. They were quite peaceful. Then to the petition, and then to the Supreme Court judgment. All this was a peaceful and constitutional, and what you'd call a democratic process.
True.
In your own words, but also, before I forget, the involvement and participation of women, you know, at the helm of this judicial system was a lady justice. You know, one camp had a running mate who, if that camp had won, would have been the first deputy president of Kenya. So two things. Do you think that women are being more compelled or being lured to public office more? But two, do you think that the process entirely has raised the bar high for the region? The process of the election, but also the judicial process. Has it raised the bar high for the entire region?
Thank you so much, Honorable. Starting with the whole process is I will first thank the political leaders in that country, both the opposition and in the ruling, who show political maturity. You know, as a political leader, the things you tell your people sometimes determine their actions. So what was Raila Odinga telling his people? He was making them trust the process, telling them, go vote, go home. Compared to us here, somebody will tell the people, vote and stay at the polling station. You know, then the process of the judges. What do Kenyans know about their courts? Do politicians tell them that the courts are corrupt, or the politicians say that we can trust them? You know, what?
But Esther, just to cut you short, and excuse me for this, but you know that it isn't about what the politicians will be saying. Justice must not only be done, but also be seen to be done. That if you're a judicial system, no one needs to say that, oh, these guys are not doing their job. They must see that you're doing your job. So I think that irrespective of what the politicians are propagating or they're saying, at the end of the day, as a judiciary, your actions must vindicate you.
That is very true, but the psychological setting of the people, you know, we are trying to bring this to Ugandans. will a Ugandan go to court trusting the outcome of the court, or they already have a psychological, you know, bias about it, you know? So what do our people know? Do we trust our courts, you know? This is what this is why I bring in our politicians that tell people that we can't trust the courts. We shall move to outside country,
public court.
Public court,
trust,
you know.
My friend, trust and confidence is earned. Yes. So if the judicial system or an electional, election commission does not earn that trust and confidence of people, it will not command it. It must earn it. So it is one thing that I think we need to be clear. If I will quote the words of the lady justice, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Kenya, mentioned two things in the introduction before the judgment. Save for the pre-1996 and also the 2002 election of Arap Moi. No, Mwai Kibaki. Yes, the outgoing of Arap Moi.
Mwai Kibaki versus Uhuru
Kenyatta. It is the only election that was not contested. Okay? And her remarks were, this shows how the people of Kenya have lost the confidence and trust in the internal management of the IBC and of the IBC, of the Independent Election Boundaries Commission, and the management of its elections. Two things here. They were, you need to look at two things. They are coming to courts to say, look, we are not trusting what the IEBC is doing, seeking for justice in courts of law. And there are also two, another thing that we need to learn. After the ruling, save for Supreme Court of Kenya being the final court of the land, Odinga and his camp came out and said, we respect the judgment. Because of the credibility, because of the confidence the Kenyan judicial system has earned. Has earned it, and everyone was waiting. What will Kenya judicial system give us is what we shall receive. Yeah, so for the case of Uganda, we need to say that
I think
one where we have lost, just a moment, where we have lost confidence in the manner of the operations of the Electoral Commission, because they have not earned that respect, that confidence and trust from the public. Not only, about a few seconds, from the public. Two, even the courts themselves. You have seen all electoral petitions and even some other, court rulings or judgments that have been issued by courts. So there has been degeneration of the independence of the judiciary. Everyone speaks about it. Whereas in Kenya, you will see that there is like a 2017. You remember the ruling? Yes, the Maraga Supreme Court. It proved the Kenyans, or the entire Kenyans, that look, the Supreme Court is independent. It exercises its independence. Whereas here in Uganda, you remember the 2006 election petition number 1 of Dr. Kiza Besigye versus Electoral Commission and Yoweri Museveni, where the courts, even the judges, came out and said, we thought we had a ruling of this nature. You get it?
Yeah.
You remember the Kanyihamba's dissent judgment.
Yes, but fair enough. Seba, you had your hand up, but I'll first give Esther a chance to complete her point.
I wanted to compliment Esther maybe before she completes her point. I think he's trivializing her argument. Her argument is not necessarily that court is not trusted. She makes an argument that, you see, the populists say of the political leaders has a big influence on how the citizens view institutions. So regardless of whether, for example, for our latest electoral petition where we had a dissenting judge, I'll bet the challenges that were within her dissenting statement, but she is saying that you will not find, for example, the people power camp saying that, all right, court had, 6 against 1, which means that at least one judge saw that we had value in our submissions. They will not say that. They will just say that there has been a state capture of court, which is dishonest for a body that you're going to you know, get some level of justice.
But yes, I agree with you, because the same court that they choose to dispute has made decisions in their favor.
Yes,
I think the Flavia Bagaya case of Mitiana, where court
against the minister, an incumbent minister,
in their favor.
So I think when she makes the statement that yes, the statements of our political leaders, because I tell you that, save for the legal scholars and probably the people in the law fraternity, many citizens do not follow court proceedings. They will wait for
the judgment,
the judgment, and then the views around that judgment. Most views are not even legal. Most views are populist. Yeah. So when she says that, that plays a critical psychological role on how the citizens respect and appreciate institutions.
It does. No, Nelson, hold up. I want to give Esther a chance to complete her point. Maybe in 2 minutes, then we can open up. Yes, Esther.
Yes. So, like he just said, we should give our courts a benefit of doubt. And the leaders should do like the case of the what's her name again? The one who was running with the minister,
Flavia Bagaya.
Flavia. So when Flavia won, she didn't come out and say the courts of Uganda are better, doing a great job. She won and she kept silent. So, but the court has given her victory. So what am I trying to say is that the people who are popular, that have a voice to speak out, should tell our people that we can trust our systems. We can't keep running away or demeaning them. We should have some trust in them.
Okay, fair enough. I have to bring in peace. Peace. One argument that seems to be consented over on this table is that the independence of Kenya's judiciary has stood very tall, right? But maybe as a legal scholar, I want us to explore the virtues that constitute the independence of the judiciary. Because I know that in Uganda's case, there was a case in the Constitutional Court of Gerard Karuhanga, where he was challenging the reappointment of Justice Odoki in acting capacity, as it was undermining the independence of the judiciary. But I think less than 2 months ago, the president again reappointed 16 judges of the High Court in acting capacity. So do you think that this affects security of tenure? Because you know that security of tenure plays a big role in affecting the independence of any institution. So do you think that we are still lacking certain things to build our judicial independence that Kenya has gone ahead to do that we are not doing? And you know, any things you think we need to pick up?
Yes, thank you. So the argument so far has been personalities versus systems. Politicians having a say over the electoral commission and the courts, and that's not how it should work ideally. No, strong systems should be able to withstand the sways of the politicians and, you know, popularist ideas. And I think that is possible in Kenya because after every 10 years, you know, you have a new person in power. So someone cannot be too popular. And in Uganda, we said all these electoral petitions, it is, you know, it came from PCJ versus Electoral Commission and another. And the another has always been His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. So, you know, we have 4 petitions and they're all against one person. That person is the incumbent. That person is the president. That person has appointed the justices. So you can see that there is no trust in the system. The system, the politicians, the people who are popular, who have power, have sway over these systems. So that means the population, the Ugandans, won't trust the systems. But we see in Kenya,
I think trusting the system should not come from who appointed the judges. It should come from the credibility of what the system is doing, of how best they are doing their job, not from who appointed them, because the appointee appoints and the work is done by them.
Well, appointment is going to play a big role because there is going to be a bias about the performance that this person has been appointed is going to do in that tenure. So we see in Kenya, in the 2010 amendment of the Constitution,
Can you just speak about appointment just for a bit? Because what I know as a fact
yes,
is that...
I'm getting to that fact
Okay.
of appointment. Because in that amendment of the Constitution, the Judicial Service Commission was supposed to nominate 3 people, forward them to the President, and the President would choose. But in a Constitutional Court case, that was overturned, and the Commission had to forward 1 person to the President, and he would appoint that person. So that means that the President does not appoint the Chief Justice. It is the Judicial Service Commission.
So because you know the procedure by which case, we appoint our judges here?
Constitutionally, we are meant to use the Judicial Service Commission to appoint the Chief Justice.
I think we
No, I disagree with you. Article 243 describes and tells us how judicial officers shall be appointed. The Judicial Service Commission recommends to the President, but the discretion lies on the President,
with the President to appoint.
Yes. And we have seen in several cases that discretion has been misused. We saw in the George Karanga versus Attorney General case, whereby we're having appointments or difficulties with appointments. So I think the role of the appointing body plays a role. And you know, the difference between Uganda and Kenya is that the Kenyans trust the systems. And the Ugandans do know there is a general apathy towards institutions, towards the Electoral Commission, towards the Parliament, towards the courts of law. And in her obiter dictum, Martha Koome, she said that the disagreement at the IEBC, whereby 4 judges say that the system is it was opaque, it wasn't clear. That disagreement, the petitioners really hint on that, because if 4 commissioners are saying that we disagree with these results, it means there's something wrong in that process. And no, the Chief Justice highlighted that as a system, the people should have trust in you. So if there are internal disagreements and people don't trust the systems, it leads to chaos.
Yeah. So because I'm told, as a matter of fact, that the public of Kenya has a role it plays in the process through which judicial officers are appointed. I was told, okay. I think at this point we should be speaking on facts and not hearsay, but there is public involvement in the process through which judicial officers are actually appointed. Whereas in Uganda's case, it appears to be a boardroom, activity.
It is General Museveni and himself.
It appears to be a backdoor. It appears to be a backdoor process. It appears to be a backdoor process, and it is not very open. I think maybe there is need for us to open up that process, so as there is a high sense of accountability.
I think when he says it is General Museveni himself, I want to remind you that General Museveni is voted democratically. So when people trust him with their vote, it means they trust his decisions.
They trust him with the constitutional mandate.
Yes. So it means that they can trust the people he appoints.
Yeah.
I think
understand my argument?
Allow me to come in. I think we shall discuss how much power the office of the presidency has in the country, because now, if we have already given that power there, clearly we should maybe just say we should recall some of the power, not say that the power is too concentrated there. My argument about specifically trusting courts on presidential petitions, I think we could learn a lot from borrowing from the electoral law of Kenya, saying, and I think this is something council has been arguing, that when you are petitioning against an incumbent, it becomes challenging because that incumbent has oversight over almost all the systems, and for our case it's even worse because arguments have been made over system capture.
No, but Seba, in 2017 the petition was against an incumbent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Kenyatta.
No.
Did the power of incumbency?
It was not about.
Did the power of incumbency stop the judiciary
Kenyatta was not
an independent
president at that time.
Literally.
No, because he had relinquished power. He was actually not staying in State House. But also, you have to swear in before. I think after 7 days of. But when there is a petition against you, then you can't swear in. You are just. You're not even called president-elect. You go back to being a presidential candidate until court pronounces itself on such results. So yes, in hindsight, you can say he could have some influence on systems, but at least he does not wield constitutional power. He cannot call and directly command, say, an army commander or the IGP, which ideally a president would, and the commander would salute. You have seen, I think, from inquisitions of Kosase in Uganda Airlines, where the minister comes and tells you that, okay, you might find challenges in, the appointment, but this was an order, a directive from His Excellency. And you understand the position the minister is taking. You are taking a directive from your appointing officer. But if we withdraw that position from the people who have to be in an electoral petition, because I think for our case, the president can always swear in, and then we go weeks hearing the petition, and then,
No.
He doesn't?
No. It happens within a prescribed period of time. I think it's 2 weeks as well.
Yeah.
I think it happens within a short period of time. Council, could you clarify first that fact?
With Ugandan context is that after an election, you have a window of 30 days.
30 days, yes.
For you to present the petition, which of course there are issues with the recommendations. Issues with the recommendations that were not adopted, by Parliament. I think I will get to discuss the details in my time.
Later. All right. I want to just bring in Esther. Thank you, Seba. I want to bring in Esther one more time before I come to Nelson. Esther, in 2017, the David Maraga-led Supreme Court overturned and nullified a presidential election. This week, the Lady Justice Martha Koome-led Supreme Court upheld the election of the president. Do you think that if this Supreme Court led by Martha Koome had overturned the election, do you think that it would affect the electoral democracy of Kenyans? Do you think that in the near future we would have Kenyans shining away from elections? Because after all, we go vote, then there is a group of 7 people who sit down and say, no, there were flaws in this process, and therefore go back and again vote. So do you think that these decisions build confidence in terms of voter turnout in the process?
Thank you so much, Honorable. I think it wouldn't matter because what really matters when you decide to go vote is you want to vote a good leader for your nation.
That's true.
So it doesn't matter if they told you have to vote 10 times because you want the best for your nation. So to me, I believe it wouldn't matter whether they would have voted again or things would have happened otherwise, because once you are determined to have a good leader for your nation, to bring change to your nation, you can do whatever it is. That's why you see other people decided to go to the bush. So once you have that determination, they can tell you vote 10 times, you will vote. They can tell you do this, you will be so extremely determined to do that. So me, I believe it doesn't matter. Yes. Okay, thank you. Nelson, let me come to you. 2 things that I would love you to distinguish for our viewers. The principle of separation of powers vis-a-vis the principle of checks and balances. Do you think that Kenya is more propelling towards the separation of powers, and that is why there is very limited interference, whereas Uganda is comfortable with checks and balances? So do you think that one of the two has a role it plays in terms of building the independence of systems, the independence of, for example, the judiciary, of parliament, of institutions? So which way to go? Separation of powers?
Thank you.
Checks and balances.
Thank you, moderator. Just before, I just wanted to give an information earlier that the entire trust and everything of Uganda trusting the Electoral Commission, of voting stay, then Kenya, they vote and leave. An election is not an event.
It's a process.
An election is a process. When you look at Kenya's process of the election, it gives that credibility to even trust that let me vote and go back home. There was nothing in Kenya where you heard about tear gas, where you heard about militarization of the process, of rallies, where you heard about arrests of presidential candidates, where you heard about, so all of that, these are indicators, and that's what they call democracy.
Yes.
Okay? Just a moment. So here in Uganda, where you're having tenets of democracy totally corrupted, degenerated, what do you talk about? Where you have no respect of human rights during an election, you saw the November, December riots. You saw them. you saw the arrests and, you know, safe houses here and there of human activists, you know. So all of that, it is a process towards an election. You saw in Kenya, where they are talking of independent audits of registers. You get what I'm talking about? By an independent firm, renowned, KPMG. Here in Uganda, you could have issues, you know, even to access the registers. I was a person who was in charge of, you know, as an agent of General Muntu in the process of, with the Electoral Commission. I observed from the process of signatures until, you know, registration of the nomination of the presidential candidate. I know what happens there. Okay, so we need to distinguish how trust and confidence comes into play. It is through a process, and Kenya has proved that. That aside,
before you go to the next part, you mentioned tear gas. You mentioned the
militarization. You just saw in the by-election in Soroti. Is that democracy? Does that give trust and confidence of the people to say we shall wait? You saw in Kayunga, you saw in Arua where people died.
What provokes the military to come on the road? Have you followed the guidelines? If they tell you campaigning hours will finish at, let me say, 5, have you followed the guidelines of the Electoral Commission?
All right. I will take it to viewers. Viewers, I just want to say this is to us, or to judge who is wrong and who is right. Whether there is, you know, militarization of the elections in Uganda and much of electoral violence. I am talking to the viewers. I will not give a response. So that is to the viewers. Whether if you tell a citizen of Uganda to go to Kenya, and run there. You remember there is a time where there was a meme all over Uganda that this is the only time where I have to support a candidate in Kenya and I cannot be arrested. You get it? A Ugandan saying, now I am supporting a candidate in Kenya because it is the time I can speak and I know I will not be arrested. I know I am not under threat. That aside, let's come to...
no, but just 1 second.
Yes.
Esther, you had a question for him. Do you want to put it to him?
I was trying to ask him that when you bring it back to Uganda,
yes,
what are our rules? What are the rules that the Electoral Commission puts up? Because every nation has its own rules and regulations. You will not bring the rules of another home in another family that they should work in your home. You set those ones in your home. So what are the rules of our Electoral Commission? Do candidates keep them so that I have kept this rule and I'm being arrested? Do candidates keep them?
Yes, I will give you 2 scenarios where I was part of the main campaign bureau for General Muntu throughout the entire election 2021. I come from Kamwenge district. I will just give that as a case study where we went and agreed with the Electoral Commission. You would designate of where you're going to have Harare. Agreed of Harare point. Electoral Commission and police, commanded by the RDC, gives an order that you will not have Harare here, you will have it in 3-4 kilometers. And
yes, that can be change of program. That can be change of events.
Change of events. You see, you need...
If something comes up and they tell you, please...
What informs that change of event? You see, an election is one... So, are you telling a presidential candidate to go and address trees? A presidential candidate, any candidate, whether parliamentary or even LC3 or even chairman LC1, is meant to address their manifesto to the public.
If your people
your role is not to be a scarecrow to the public.
Ivan, a second. I think that as we argue, we must factor in the circumstances under which this particular election was held. It was held in the wake of COVID-19, right? So because
we can go 2011.
Because
we can go 2006.
You know,
we can go 2006.
You know the social contract theory. The state has a responsibility to its citizens, one of which is to protect life, okay, life and property. So if a given presidential candidate and their activities is going to expose the people to danger, to health hazards, then I think the state must come in to enforce and regulate so that your actions don't affect the lives of other citizens.
I respect that.
So I think that all players must perform, must play with restraint.
Let me use my time a bit.
Yeah.
I respect that.
1 minute.
Mr.
I'll bring in
Moderator.
Seba.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Moderator. That one, when you look at what informs those decisions, but also we have had a number of election cycles, and it has been a repeat of the same.
Okay, are you blaming
only
one player?
Has there been COVID? Was there COVID in 2006?
Have these outcomes?
Was there COVID in 2011? Was there COVID in 2016?
Nelson, have these outcomes been as a result of the performance or actions of only one party, or there are different parties participating?
Do you know a fish? We all know a fish. A fish starts rotting from its head.
In this case,
it does not start rotting from its tail.
In this case, you're all players.
So we are players.
Political players in the opposition, inciting the people.
But you see, let's really agree here. There are things I condemn. Okay, I would say really, I condemn violence, and I'm not, a pro-violent person in any matters. But look, where you're having, instead of a state trying to contain the situation, escalates it by stimulating the factors that
Nelson,
calmed it down.
We saw on the streets of Kampala citizens going ahead to ban property. So did you want the state to restrain and not go ahead to protect the life and property
the issue,
of the innocent citizens?
Would be the SWOT analysis of why.
And being pushed by a political candidate.
You ask why people on the streets sent by, let's assume, you're saying that what are they protesting against? Why are they protesting against?
No, what I agree with you,
so that you cure the root problem.
What I agree with you is that the amount of force could have been excess that the state exerted. There I agree. But the state has a responsibility to regulate any excess actions of citizens. Protect lives and property of citizens.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
So
maybe the excess force, but
the excess
Nelson,
force and all other things.
I think you've had enough time.
But I just wanted to mention something small on the checks and balances. We all know the book of George William Kanyihamba. Checks and balances, we are seeing the three arms of government. They are seen as cooking stones. Okay? 3 cooking stones that if you remove one,
the pot falls.
Okay? So you cannot have total separation. Okay? You cannot have total separation. But what you need is to have respect of the independence of each. And how? By putting in place things to give them capacity and letting them function on their own. Not influences we have had here, where the president is the one appointing even when we have had election recommendations from an electoral petition of Mama Mbabazi, versus electoral mission and another. You have just had in 2011, when you look at the election petition, the election recommendations of 2011, which brought a number of recommendations and they were adopted. Here, the same thing was done in 2016, which recommendations were adopted. So we need to agree that Kenya is advancing in as far as democratic dispensation is concerned on the East African bloc. Where you look, there is some level of independence of the institutions. 2, there is
Nelson, 1 second.
There are all those things that Uganda, we are having the militarization of the state, state capture of all institutions, power seems to be in one, where parliament is being raided and all other things. How is parliament independent?
Guys,
members have voted
please.
democratically.
The functions.
As a moderator, I first of all want to commend the spirited conversation and discourse that has happened on this side of the house. I first of all want to make it clear that even in Kenya, that we seem to be celebrating in 2017, why their rerun only had one candidate and not Baba running is because the IEBC had not taken into account the recommendations of court that year. And that's why the opposition shunned that election. So I think that probably the Electoral Commission on our side needs a big push to now try to respect court more than they're doing, because when you look at it now, it's pure insubordination, and that in a country like ours should have some sort of repercussions. Yeah. But we don't seem to have those presently. So the Electoral Commission can always either take on court's recommendation or not, and there won't be any repercussions to them. But I just wanted to make two arguments. The first one will be on separation of power, and I think the legal scholar here made it very clear that when you have someone being in office for more than 10 years, by all means, you will find yourself in a situation where they have control on almost all institutions of government, or even all arms of government. It may not be of design, but because of how much they have been in power, and most times all the other institutions are changing leadership. So it goes without saying that if you do not have a mechanism that changes leadership, we may have the same ruling party, but probably change the personality. That would go a long way into guaranteeing the independence or the respect for the independence of those institutions. The second is, I think the argument he was making about electoral interferences, or how much force we use. I think regardless of where you are, there is something that we need to call out as a country, that we do not have any reason to have the army on our streets during elections, none. And I have had the opportunity to go to Mogadishu to visit our AMISOM, to visit the AMISOM troops that we have there. And I can tell you that in 2011, because I vote in Kampala, Luzira, I saw more willpower, I saw more firepower in Kampala than I saw in Somalia. I say that without, I mean, choppers were flying. For those of us that voted in Kampala, I don't know how many of us here voted in Kampala here, but
I voted in Gulu.
I saw so many car types, and my love of cars that I had never seen in my life, that were walking the streets of Kampala, and I kept wondering, what is so bad that we need the army here? I'll tell you that I think the only guns I saw in Nairobi were the ones of my guard. And I think when we went to visit the police station, but almost on all polling stations, the people that were manning them were just having platoons to ensure people are in line. You know? So I think that there are some things we it
was a civilian-driven process.
Not necessarily, because you will find that in places like Mombasa, Kakamega, there were some altercations that needed armed forces to be involved, but still it was police.
Yeah, police.
What I'm saying is, and I think when he mentions that the RDC can come on the eve of your rally and tell you that, okay, you're going somewhere where your people cannot walk to, or will not have investment to go to. They don't have incentive to spend money to travel more 10 kilometers because your venue has been shifted. We could always make the argument, and I think the RDCs who are ideally government, because for them they are literally within the government structure, and sometimes
they're appointed by the president.
Not necessarily, but of course they are appointed by but sometimes they're just rewardees of the NRM. And you will find that they use that opportunity, and I've never had any RDC that is telling the NRM that Boma grounds in Soroti cannot be used by the president because we feel like security has not been, intact or enough.
Fair enough.
The argument I'm saying is that
you have to take a short break.
I want to pose a question. Why should citizens of Uganda have a problem with military being around them? You're being protected. It's during an
if my sister does not see a problem,
there is a role of police, there is a role of the army. The army is to defend the sovereignty of the country.
No, they can't.
The police,
the military.
No, we use the law. We don't use the power.
No,
we don't do what we feel that needs to be done.
That we do have police and military police. But if you do not find a problem with the army operating within the boundaries of our country, then clearly that is a big challenge.
Unless there is really a big threat of maybe terrorism or...
Even then we do have a unit that's supposed to man terrorism.
I mean, unless it is extreme conditions.
I think that the only extreme conditions would be war spilling into the country.
Yes.
And I don't think
there is the police act. There is the army. What is the role of the army?
That's for example why the police call
Why do we have divisions in the police saying this is red
Criminal
top, this is
division,
criminal, this is military, police.
intelligence.
I
That
think
is not.
to me,
Do we have army police?
Do
Do we have army? We don't have army police here. Why would we have army people armed everywhere?
For example, the army being involved because we have a situation.
An election is a civilian process.
We are not in a
I also have
court
personal
process
reservations
here.
as to why
No.
the army would really be in that process. It is a purely civilian process. And I think that we must regulate their involvement in this process.
But maybe the percentage you see is just maybe 0.5% of being
Do you stay in Uganda?
and they are trying to complement the police.
Our time is fast spent. I think the extent to which I would agree with that is if it is an extreme situation where the sovereignty of the country is at stake. There you would maybe
They
close
don't
an eye and have
want
the
it
military.
to get to an extreme before they act. So they want to act earlier.
Fair enough. No. I was coming to you. I was coming to you. So just
They
guys,
don't want it
let
to
us
wait.
get back here, please. My last question to you before we take a short commercial break is, without fear of res sub judice, not commenting on an ongoing case, because this case has already been decided. So I would put a question to you. I want to put you on the seat of the Lady Justice Martha Koome. You're the Chief Justice in this situation, and 8 issues are brought to your table. Do you think, well, I will not read all of them, but maybe pick out 1 or 2 of them. For example, whether there was interference with the uploading and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling station to the IEBC public portal. There are so many issues raised, about 8 or 9. Do you think that some of these issues really, if well scrutinized, would have had legitimate grounds?
Well, to begin with, I think that the time period, that short time frame that is given the petitioner to bring the case before the court is too short to adduce all the evidence. So it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's also a bad thing. It's a limitation. So I don't think the petitioner had the sufficient time and resources to gather all the appropriate evidence to bring before the court. So on most of the issues, the petitioner don't have adequate evidence. It wasn't sufficient to raise the claims. But I agree with Martha Koome with what she did. On all 8 claims, it was no. Because if they only left maybe 2 claims standing, 3 claims standing, that would be a reason for the petitioner to go to the public and say, see, even the Supreme Court has said that these 3 claims of ours stand, that the election was not free and fair, that there was rigging in the process and all of that. So I think it was an appropriate move to say that the case has been dismissed on all issues and that no ground is left standing.
Okay, fair enough. Colleagues, thank you very much. This takes us definitely for a short commercial break. Well, we look forward to the whole judgment that we expect to come out within 21 days, whereby we shall be able to read the recommendations being made and maybe pick a leaf or 2 to incorporate it into our Uganda system. But for now, we'll take a short commercial break and see you just in a second. Just don't blink because you'll miss out on something. See you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Yeah, well, we'll be back from that short commercial break. Well, like I told you earlier on, phase 2 shall explore Uganda's political journey. You know that next month we are moving towards the independence month, and Uganda makes 60 years. So the question would be, how would a 60-year-old man look, or woman? Well, this conversation will explore that particular aspect. And without any particular order, let me just begin with you, Esther. You know, so 60 years down the road, are there gains that we have to register politically as a country? We know that 60 years down the road, we have been able to register about 4 constitutions from 1962, 1966, 67, and then 95. You know, is this an aspect of democratization? Have we made political progress? But also we know that we have had military rule, we have had, you know, so many other setbacks. So in your own words, do you think that we have moved politically as a country post-independence?
Thank you so much, Honorable. I would say a capital yes, that we have moved so well, and we are doing so well politically, and we are overcoming the challenges that we started with our first 3 presidents, and the current president is trying to fix them, trying to erase the errors that the previous ones made. And I would say that we are moving very well with the stability we have. You can remember where you come from, the northern Uganda. Kony was doing bad there, and he has been cleared. From the western part, ADF, we were doing bad with it. It has been cleared. And Lakwena was in the east. Lakwena.
North.
He was also in the north.
North, then towards east as she existed.
Yeah, so she was cleared. So, and we have even gone beyond East Africa. We are in Somalia. We are in Congo. We have operations in Congo. We helped in South Africa. We helped in Liberia. We helped in South Sudan. So we are all over the place. So we are doing very well in terms of stability. We are doing very well in terms of peace. We are doing very well in terms of course, the topic is politically, but in terms of if I bring in economic, if I bring in these other sectors, we are doing so well, and we are even expanding to across Africa, to other regions. So I would say yes, we are doing so well so far.
All right, fair enough. Nelson, let me come back to you. Let me come back to you, Nelson. And with you, as we explore the politics, I would love us to do so in contrast or in comparison with the legal framework that we have been able to build as a country. I don't know how many amendments the USA Constitution has, but I think around 26. And they've had the Constitution for, I don't know, but so many years. But I've had only 26 amendments. Uganda, we have had 4 constitutions, and the most recent has had, I don't know how many amendments. So as we register political progress with the way Esther has asserted, do you think that this political progress has come at the expense of legal, legal growth, if I'm to put it?
Well, thank you, moderator and colleagues, panelists. Well, I will hold my opinion. It is for me and for the viewers to judge. When you look at the political history for 60 years, next month we shall be celebrating 60 years. Just briefly, is you saw the DP Kabakayeka, UPC Kabakayeka, DP Marpate systems during the independence period. 66, the overthrow of the Kabaka through the Pigeonhole Constitution. Then later, 67, declaring Uganda a republic, a republican state by Obote. 71, Obote overthrown by the then Army Commander Idi Amin, who ruled by decrees, no constitution. He was the constitution, and the constitution was himself for those years until 79. with the help of the Tanzanian forces. They overthrew Amin. We saw a number of presidents coming there, the military commission coming, and they decided now, let us have elections again, 1980. So literally since we didn't have elections since 1962 until 1980. You get it?
Around 18 years.
Yes, about, close to that time. 1980, we go into an election where the now movement, the national resistance movement, then UPM participated and contested an election on allegations that it was not free and fair, on allegations that there was high militarization of the election. If you remember, you're from the north, there was they had to block the Karuma, and then the entire DP, they were arrested in the morning, released in the evening. So the entire north, I think even part of West Nile, if you get in the records, they were all independents. No one ran against them. Why? They are arrested in the morning before nomination, released in the evening. And almost the entire North Corridor had independent candidates of the UPC. So all of that said and done, the regime says the now President Museveni, Commander-in-Chief, contests the election. He even lost his own election in Mbarara North against Sam Kutesa. UPM only had one candidate, which was Crispus Chionga from Kasese. They contested election on grounds of rigging, on grounds of human rights violations, on grounds of high militarization of the election, and lack of intolerance of the regime then. So of the Popular Party, which was UPC, they contest the election. They go to Luwero. They had a masterpiece document, 10-point program. They go to Luwero. By God's grace, they came to power. 1986. Promised that give us this number of years, from 1966 to 92, so that they come up with a document that would, to ensure that they restore. They really had sober brains. 1992, they constitute the assembly, the Constituent Assembly, to ensure that they come up with the constitutions where the Matembes, the Amanyamushegas, the Kiza Besiges, and the likes had to participate, to come up with a masterpiece document recording our history of from 1962 to 78 without an election. With so many coups, with so many violations, with so many militarization of elections that had happened, with so much gross violence of human rights. You saw those cases of the expatriate of and so many cases there. Abu Mayanja, and so when they come up with that constitution, well capped, because they had said they were sober men and women.
They are still sober.
I just want to say, they put in term limits because they knew the causes of the problem. Let us put term limits. Let us put age limits. Those are safety valves, nets, of which were for the constitution. They, put different, judiciary and all that. Now,
I want to hold you right
2000,
there.
yes.
Yes, I want to hold you right there and I bring in peace.
But I wanted just to build just in a second. Now, after the term limits come, 2004, they go to Chankwanzi, and General Museveni and his group thinks that, look, how did this software valve, now it is getting me off the system, I still want to cling on to power. They remove it, manipulated the people, except for 6. That was General Muntu, Amanya Mushega,
but I don't know why.
Miriam Matembe and the likes. And they said, we are not amending. They continued and amended the constitution. Term limits, age limits in 2017, you saw them. The man was already at the top, was already, we knew that now General Museveni is getting off the stage. We are having irrespective of the constitution. It is again amended. Today, as you speak, you will hear corridors saying that the man is getting too old, he's not going to be able to be moving in the entire country, and there is no COVID as an excuse to say we can have restricted TV rallies. So let us have a change of the regime of electoral system.
Fair enough.
So you look that it is not in a good spirit.
You really explored that history very well. And I want to bring in Peace right there. Peace, the aspect of militarization of Uganda's politics, of Uganda's politics did not begin today. Okay? If you recall the way the Pigeonhole Constitution was passed, the entire National Assembly was surrounded by military officers, and the MPs then were forced to promulgate the Constitution and thereafter find it in their pigeonholes. Coming to 1971, to 1979 rather, military rule. So, but also going back to the colonial days, the excess use of military rule by the governor on the citizens was also witnessed. So do you think that the militarism of Uganda's politics is not a question of today, but rather it has so much historical aspect attached to it, and therefore we can castigate maybe President Museveni or anyone else, but these are historical tenets that of course we must move away from, but do you think that there's a historical aspect attached to it?
Yes, thank you. You say that next month Uganda is making 60 years.
That's right.
And if you as a man, he would be a 60-year-old man. If Uganda were to be a 60-year-old man, he would be a man who had been standing in one place for 36 years. So we have 24 years and 36 years. So it's even difficult to weigh progress, because we have lived a big section of our lives in one era. I think all of us in this room were born in the Museveni regime. We don't know what it is like before. We only know what it is like to be in this regime. We have nothing to
I'm
compare.
sorry to cut you short. The man would not be in one position. The man would be moving to different positions, because where the president found this country is not where it is when you read history. Even if you are born in this regime, but if you read history of what was happening in terms of in terms of the political, social, and economic environment then and now, things are different.
It is change of words. Panda gari in Amin. Here drones. What else?
Okay, let's allow Peace to make a point.
As I've said, for 6 years, this person will be standing in the same place. So we have 24 years violent politics. We have the 36 years came in through violent politics. So I think democracy as a whole is a concept that is foreign to Uganda. We can't say we ever really knew democracy.
So
we have ever really known democracy.
So are you agreeing with what Dambi Samoyo said in her book, that what African states need is not a multi-party dispensation, but rather a benevolent
dictatorship?
I agree with Dambi Samoyo.
It is difficult, 60 years is a short time. Countries like the USA have had more than 200 years to, to forge it. And like the system that we have is not a system that we made. It is a system that was made for us. Uganda is not something that Ugandans came up with. Uganda is something that was sat in Manchester and we're like, this will be Uganda. So we are living in a world that was created for us. We are pieces on a chessboard.
We have opportunity to start creating what is for us, what we want.
We created this in 86 with the 10-point program. We have now started to undo what we created. We are getting back to the days, really.
What we want for us. But when we talk about Ugandan politics, we think about one person, His Excellency Museveni. He is the Father, He is the Son, He is the Holy Spirit. And as Ugandans, we are the people whom He bestows upon His gifts.
Sorry.
we are the sheep to be given the gifts, because He is everything. It's the police, the military, the judiciary, the parliament. It is all His Excellency President Museveni.
But that is not by his making. That is the legal framework. The legal framework
the fountain of honor
gives powers to the office of the president.
Yes, it gives power to the president, but it also creates the legislature. It creates the judiciary. It gives them power.
Yes.
But in the system, 36 years down the road, we don't think about the parliament or the judiciary or the executive. It is all one person. He is everything.
Isn't that
I
unfair?
don't know how
Isn't that
everything
an
comes in.
unfair
Because
argument or allegation?
It isn't an unfair argument.
Because we have
Because
seen
these
we
people
have
are
seen
voted
we have
into
seen the
parliament.
legislature holding the executive accountable on so many instances.
What instances?
Oh, come on. The Vinci coffee deal, the judiciary, the legislature, nullified it.
The accountability.
You look at the COSASE investigation that is going against the executive.
It is on minute issues, on issues that do not count, on issues that do not really reflect on Uganda as a whole.
Come on.
But to answer your
if
question,
you speak about coffee, how many Ugandans are brewing coffee? How many Ugandans are farming coffee? So if there's anything that matters to Ugandans, it is actually their livelihood, which comes from things like coffee, things like bananas, things like matoke. So we shouldn't look at this argument prima facie, but rather go to the root of it. So I think that the judiciary and the legislature have held the executive accountable on issues that matter to the citizens.
But
I think they have
issues that matter are not only
judiciary.
political, but also economic in nature.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Moderator, we have had where the president has told Parliament, don't tell me the issues of PPDA. For me, you continue deal with whatever you're doing. Don't tell me about PPDA.
We have seen also Parliament
who makes it,
censure.
who enacts the law? Parliament.
We have seen Parliament censure presidential appointees.
We have seen, look, we have seen the executive, the arm of the executive itself putting hands in the legislature, in Parliament, saying, this is the money, please do this. Without doing it, we have had confessions made on how the Constitution was amended. You will say that the Constitution was the will of the people? To the amendment of the 2017 election, Constitution.
But
it was
why,
not.
Why
do we continue to see the hand
the clause that was amended
of the executive?
Yes, the clause that was amended was not an entrenched clause. No, and I agree that the basic structure doctrine was altered. I agree, because the basic structure doctrine isn't only about the entrenched clauses, but rather the clauses that, if tampered with, affect the whole structure of the Constitution.
Absolutely.
I agree with you to that extent. What I don't agree with you is saying that the judiciary has been an entirely a rubber stamp, and the cabinet has had its way entirely.
No,
I think there are instances where there have been changes.
Mr. Moderator, I'm yet to get an opportunity.
We are talking of COSASE, and they are telling you it is the directive of the president that said, please appoint her. And in his speech at Kololo, where he said, now it is the time for the Vazukulu of the Sabarwani, of the Abarwanako, so that they will have to secure the future.
Listen.
Not at all.
Fair enough. Please, just 1 minute.
I would like to conclude.
And to bring in Seba.
So we saw the 1966 coup, the 1971 coup, the 1979 coup, the 1981 to 1986 guerrilla war. So literally, the history of Uganda is rooted in militarism. It's rooted in conflict, in coups. The army plays a central role in the country and is still playing a central role. So this regime came in through a guerrilla war. And although attempts have been made to legitimize the process, it will never be legitimate enough. When your president is a general, the country is basically under a form of military rule. We have seen that the heads of NIRA, National Forest Authority, the police, all actually statutory bodies right now are headed by someone in the UPDF. Everything in the country is run by the UPDF. It is generals all over. Even in the elections, it would be General Museveni versus Kano Kiza Besije. So we see that the country is run by the military.
Even his party leader is a former military.
He's brigadier. He's a general. So it is politics run by generals and brigadiers and cannons. And in most
so are you saying that also ANT is being run by a general and a military officer?
Foster?
The party is rooted in militarism.
In militarism.
General Montu is not our leader.
He was part of
General Montu is not our leader. our leader
He's the founder.
He is the founder.
is part of the founders.
Principles of the party are rooted in his vision.
Not his vision.
And at a certain point in his life, he shared the same vision with His Excellency Museveni. So we can say that they are from the same root.
So,
they have risen from the same root.
You're saying that NRM, ANT, FDC
are
all under military?
No, they are
military
rooted in militarism. That what FDC would give us if it came into power, or what ANT would give us if it came into power. We are not sure if those things would be different with what NRM has given us, because the roots are the same.
Good argument, good argument.
The roots are the same.
Council, good argument. I have to bring in Seba. Seba, I would like to explore your mind on the East African Federation. We know that even in the pre-colonial days and even post-colonial, there were arguments around trying to create an East African community, an East African Federation. These attempts have been there. So, but, and in my own opinion, I think that we made more progress under the colonial rule in terms of trying to bring East Africa together. The East African Court of Appeal was established in the colonial days and things like that. So do you think that when Uganda and these other East African states got independence, they misused or they lost direction in terms of the East African Federation? Or we were better off with the colonial guidance in terms of creating the EAC?
So certainly we cannot credit the oppressor in any way, or the colonial regime. I first of all want to say that even against I first of all want to appreciate colleagues because they seem to have good command of the history of our country, which is a very bright sign for the future of this country. If young people are invested in the history and where we came from, it shows that we have good direction going forward. I also want to say that it is not fair to give blanket statements for this country. 60 years down the road, I think we have achieved a couple of things. Yeah, I think I could point out that we now stand very sovereign as a country. Even if we will disagree with their methods, but people like our former president Idi Amin, when he dismissed the Indians. Of course, there are mixed emotions around there, but it was a big statement against the imperial regime. Of course, he's not the only one who has done it. Mauritius has dismissed Indians from their country and a couple of other countries, but that went a long way. We have also seen the current president, retired General Museveni, stand against probably interests that are from the West. And which goes a long way into saying that we have some level of independence, at least when it comes to our values as people or protecting our interests. Also, growth around politics in itself. We have seen that back in the day, we used to have military coups, people ruling within the same circles, but deposing each other. But today we have some level of democracy. I think that that is something to appreciate in form of political will, that even if we do have a couple of challenges about transparency, about how elections are being handled, but we cannot take away the fact that we actually do have our opposition leaders standing against the president or the incumbent, or that we have dissenting views being aired and publicized on all media. I don't watch UBC so much. I don't know whether it happens there, but I have seen panelists on some of their shows that still call out government. I think that level, we need to appreciate that level of freedom of expression. Yeah, of course we do have sporadic pickups in drones, and I think they were escalated during the 2021 election. But you can appreciate that we have had some level of citizens saying, okay, we can speak our minds. It might not be picked up, but at least it will be known. I think the best example was when, God rest his soul, the dead general took to rest. And you could realize in eulogizing him, even the president actually alluded to how many people were unfortunately celebrating his death on social media, which means that Ugandans now feel the comfort to do particular things, and so much that even the leaders capture the voices of these people. That now you do not have to either have a microphone to address the president for him to, listen from you. I think that those are gains that we need to appreciate as a country. Of course, some of them are not guaranteed by the regime because we do have globalization. By all means, the president needs to probably scroll through his Twitter comments. When we come to the region, as East African community, of course, we know that the community has fallen before. and it had to be restored in the early 2000s. And we know very well that, and I think you made reference to the court at regional level. We also know very well that we stand better as a country to gain, mostly from the economic bit of it. When we are a community, we have seen states like the United States of America, where and then the European Union, where federation or confederation has worked so well for them. Yeah, that union has guaranteed very many things. As an East African community, and looking at it from the Ugandan perspective, or from the independence of other states, is that we actually have growth at the regional level. That I think serve for Uganda and Rwanda, that almost all the other East African countries have had change of guard. So we do not have the vision bearers, quote unquote, of the East African countries still in power. Yet we still have the East African vision glowing so bright. You know, of course, there are challenges that come with regional integration. We all know, I think, only me and her not legal minds, but we all know that when laws are shift from national level to any other international level, they become soft laws. They are usually at the mercy of sovereign states to implement. So those challenges clearly cannot be overlooked. But by all means, that we say that independence of EAC countries contributed so much to East Africans feeling that we can own this integration agenda. Maybe to conclude and say that the best way to examine our 60 years would be to say that we examine, yes, both the political end, which people have clearly deliberated on, but also the economic end.
No, actually, we are doing a series. So this episode is to focus on the political.
Great.
Next week we shall focus on the economic and social and things like
very
that.
Well.
But yes, a comment on the economic.
I just wanted to say that growth should be seen in all aspects, not only in numbers. I saw the other day our president was, I don't want to say forcing the issue, but I'm forced to say he was forcing the issue that we are a middle income country. Yeah. Although the World Bank, of course, begged to differ, but I kept wondering, the countries like China still identify as developing countries because they know the benefits that are accrued in, identifying as such. I don't know why we are fighting so hard to run away from it. But I also think that growth should not be seen only in numbers or on paper, because on paper we are such a beautiful country, both in governance and even, as you have seen, in growth economically. But it is also supposed to be seen in the way of life of the citizens. That when she makes an argument that we are safe, we probably do not have war, but for a long time now we have had high-profile people being assassinated on the roads. Right now, I don't know whether you can move 100 meters in Uganda without seeing a car that is manned with machine guns, in the city, because they are protecting one or two people. I think that all those things are, and of course the challenges that have been mentioned around elections and all. I feel like 60 years later, we are descending into the indecency of our ancestors as a country.
Good argument.
So it will not be so much growth that in the intermediate we did so well, but when some guard is going away, that they need to go away when people are laughing at them or people are celebrating their demise. It points to self-examination. First of all, our liberators, who I think have now gained a spirit of entitlement onto the country, as opposed to a patriotic spirit of saying, I had my contribution, I can now rest, saying very well that, I contributed a block or two onto the growth of the country. I think that we need to, and I know that the time is not enough for us to examine. That's why some people give sweeping statements, depending on which side of the aisle they are. But I think there are quite a couple of gains that we have to celebrate as a country and appreciate vividly. But I think there are also incidents, not actually incidents. I think that there are characters that particular individuals are normalizing to make systems, which is regrettable for a growing country. Lastly, I want to say that I think the biggest challenge now has come with growth of the internet. We want to compare ourselves to democracies and economies that have stood the time of 200 years, 300 years, which would be unfair to us that are 60 years. But I mean, you could say that it is good incentive for us to strive to be there. But generally speaking, I think we could do better as a country 60 years later.
Fair enough. Good argument. Esther, let me come to you. Let me put on some feminine lenses onto your eyes, okay? and the progress that women have made in this country. We know that constitutionally, Article 32 provides for affirmative action. 33, that is meant to empower the marginalized groups of society, women, youth, and things like that. Today, we're in a country where the vice president is a woman, the prime minister is a woman, the speaker of parliament is a woman. There's all districts have women members of parliament. You know, so do you think that we have made progress in terms of empowerment of women in this country 60 years down the road?
Capital letters, yes, and we have made so much. I think maybe Rwanda can catch us, can try to catch with us, but in East Africa we are doing so well with the empowering women, and I think well, those are the only. Those are the ones in political spaces, but there are others that are being empowered, like in the law society.
Like the CEO of Uganda Airlines.
Who gets a job without applying for it? That's the government getting a job without applying for it.
I need to react to the affirmative action.
Even in other sectors that the public does not know about, our president is working so hard that he empowers women so much. So there is so much empowerment of women over here, so much. And by the way, even young women, he is making sure that young women are empowered. So much, like there is so much that is happening with women. So I will say a capital yes to that.
Yeah, because in terms of empowerment, I also know that there is a fund that is set aside for only the women. So
yes,
I think that so far so good in terms of empowering women.
Very
Fair enough.
true.
Seba,
Yes. I did want to react to affirmative action and say two things: that women are the majority in this country. They are by far more than the men, and of course, youth, men and women, are more than men and women who are adults. I just feel that this empowerment conversation, and growing up, it was a debate we used to have in high school, whether we still need women empowerment and youth empowerment. Probably 20 years later since it was created, and I think the question we should argue for is no longer whether women are really empowered because we have affirmative action for them to be in parliament. I think their empowerment should be a test of letting them, fly free. And as a staunch feminist, devout, without question, I will say that the principle should be that they should have the same leveling. We should create systems that appreciate both men and women at the same pedestal, not saying that, okay, the system can glorify one side, but no, we shall give a token to the other side for them to try and catch up. I don't think that is something that will help the growth of women or young girls. Of course, I want to credit the government. I think now, majority of our civil servants are young people. Which is a good thing, regardless of where you go in the forces. Majority of them are young people, not just in foot soldiers, but even I think in the recent appointments we have seen a litany of young people being appointed into commandant positions. When you come to almost all fields of government, we have more young people being assimilated in government, whether it's by design because it's the present population, or whether it is government showing some progressiveness into handing over power or mentoring young leaders.
It's a question for another day.
It's a question for probably the appointing officer.
Okay.
In my opinion, would be that I think it's about time that for us to test this empowerment conversation, we scrap off the affirmative action card. And we see whether indeed our women and our youth are empowered.
Yeah, I think I agree with you to the extent that, we must be able to compare this empowerment vis-a-vis, for example, gender-based violence cases that continue on the rise. Issues around teenage pregnancies. I think those are some of the things that continuously undermine the empowerment of women. But yeah, good argument right there. Nelson, just conclusively, our time is fast spent, but the empowerment of youth, politically, of course. There's an argument that in the independence years of Africa, from 1959 when Ghana gained its independence as the first African state, and Kwame Nkrumah, these were young men. You come to Samora Machel of Mozambique, these were young men at the time. You go to Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso. These were young guys.
Yeah.
You know,
Even Museveni of Uganda or Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania.
These were young guys.
Even the gorilla, they were all young men.
Yes, they were
young men.
Young guys, yes, exactly. So I'm trying to find the aspect of empowerment of youth, because it appears to me that young people were actually empowered already in those days. But again, we have an article specifically to empower young people. We know that there's the National Youth Council. We know that there are youth MPs in Parliament. Shouldn't we have been better empowered as young people? Or do you think that there is need for us to, intentionally empower young people? For example, I know in A&T, you have the youth wing. Why shouldn't we have just let you compete fairly to be part of the executive rather than you competing with only fellow young people? So I think that there is some gray area that maybe you could explain to us.
Well, thank you once again. I didn't get an opportunity to just highlight on something, in the previous kind of discussion.
You can do so in a minute.
To say, when you're talking of the Musevenism and the 60 years of independence, whether we've made progress or not, the question now, as of today, we should not even be thinking about that. We should be thinking, where are we heading? The post-Museveni era. Are we certain of what is going to happen tomorrow? Do we have a contribution and an impact on to shape what our tomorrow should be like as young people? Those should be questions. We have had young people who, during independence, almost all the government, the Obote, the Kabaka then, and the ministers, the Ivinjira, Grace Ivinjiras, they were all young people. The Genome 7 group in the bush, they were all young people of 20, 19, 17, the Kahindo Tafires. We had the General Muntus becoming the army commanders at the age of 29, political commissars, the Kiza Messages and all that. They made a sacrifice and a contribution to shape where we are. For some reason, they lost direction, in my opinion. I don't want just to. Now, where we are going, are we certain? What is the role of the young people? What is this government doing? We have had scenarios. Long governments in power, case scenarios. We have the one of Gaddafi, that was Libya. What happened after Libya for his almost 40 years in power? Doing all those glorious things of we have achieved so much. What else? They didn't see the post-Gaddafi era. And right now, Libya is on the soils. Same thing, Zimbabwe. Same thing. So we need now to think about the post-Museveni era. Because we are not certain. We are here speaking. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. Whatever, for God's sake, God forbid. But what happened in Tanzania, if it happened here, what would be the turnout? What would be the reaction? That's a food for thought for all of us, viewers and panelists, that we need now to focus so much. Instead of discussing about the achievements of the regime and the growth of independence and all that, let's think of what is the post-Museveni era. How will it look like? What is my contribution? What is my impact to shape the tomorrow that I want to see? That's the question I think the Libyans didn't address. They just kept on glorifying Gaddafi, roads, money, access, youth funds and all that. They forgot the post-Gaddafi era, and that's why they're in the source. I just pray to Ugandans and all viewers, let's think about what we can do. Coming back to
the youth
question. We are cognizant that 78% of the population, we are the young people of this country. Our contribution, are we empowered so much? Are we not? Have we taken a step to do so much that we reclaim the spaces that probably have been taken from us? Those are questions. Young people in those days reclaimed their spaces. That's why you saw young graduates from Makerere said, look, we cannot be absorbed by this kind of government. We shall go there and just be a nobody. We just get into the tokenism area. Comfort zone where a few colleagues just hold up into tokenism positions and everybody loses position. They had a vision. They said, let us take a sacrifice and pay a price to liberate the country. God's grace, they liberated the country. Where I have a challenge with them, later on the course, they lost direction. Where now we are thinking of, are we still in the 96 program or things changed? The way you are seeing things changing. My prayer is that, yes, as much as we are having slots of representation of the young people, we are talking of inclusion from policy making, monitoring, and implementation. We are making some baby steps into that direction, where we have got in areas where there are systems that recognize the role of the young people. Like in the ANT, I will speak. That in the ANT, there is recognition of the role of the young people. Even where policies, designs are made and even implemented by the young people. Okay? We are having that hybrid integrated approach in handling issues in the ANT, where there is a deliberate effort to nurture young leaders with vision, with values. The question can be, what has gone wrong since 1962? Having the same, different faces, but the same thing. We have a different face, but we're having the same reasons why the people went to the bush. Rigging of elections, allegations, I'm not saying. Allegations. The allegations then, why they went to the bush. Today, the allegations. It can be the same reason. Some group of people can say, let us also go to the bush. Violent, disrespect of human rights. The same thing today. Why? Is that the reason why we have had young people in the government. We have had all the people like Genome 7 and his group in the government. Same things. Is the issue about who is younger? Is the issue being who is older and have the vision of the people? No.
Good question.
The issue is about the values of the leaders, whether they have the interest of the country or not. Those are things that we need to be talking about. That person that you're voting for at your home to represent you at a local council in parliament, is he or she someone who values that has interest of this country, or is someone who is just obsessed by looking at politics as a source of income?
Good question. Good question. Colleagues, I love the enthusiasm here. I love the energy. Well, our time is fast spent and we have to bring this show to an end, but I'll give you each 30 seconds and I'll be very strict on this. Just imagine you had the power to choose how this year's theme would be 60 years down the road. How would you craft the theme to celebrate this year's Independence Day? That is the first task. Then the second task is to give us your final words on the show, but all that within 30 seconds. I'll begin with the Lady Justice.
Okay, thank you. It's difficult to craft a theme immediately, but I think the theme at Uganda's 60 years, celebration should be about evaluating the past, the present, and preparation for the future, because the present and the past are so interlinked. And if the present is to continue with the way it is, I think it is going to lead to catastrophe. So while we're looking towards the future of Uganda, we should look at where we are right now, why we are here, and what we can learn from the past to create a better future for Uganda. You talk about the post-Museveni era. I think that there is no post-Museveni era. I think that we can't look at 2026 and be certain. We are all looking at the now, struggling for the moment right now. So I think at this point, at 60 years, something we need to look at. I know these decisions aren't made by us, people, common people. So they are not contributions of the youth, because we don't contribute to that. We have not contributed to that. These decisions of who leads the country aren't made by us. So I guess this is the plea for people in power to make those decisions now, so that if anything happens, we are not shocked and that we will not degenerate.
Okay.
My contribution.
Seba, 30 seconds.
I don't think I would want to contribute to the theme of celebrating 60 years, at least not for the event where speeches are given. I just encourage citizens to self-examine whether the country is where they feel safe to say they are Ugandans, or whether something has to be done, and whether, like he shared, that there is a contribution that they can make towards that something to be done. But maybe to conclude, I think that I will do two things. First, to say that our problem is not the same faces. Different faces and same problems. Our challenge is having people who know that they can keep coming and coming and coming, provided they have the resources. I think we need to bring back a system where we have term limits, and someone knows that I have 2 terms, and for the first time, if I mess up, probably I'll be kicked out. But after 2 terms, however powerful I am booted. And then lastly, and this is a big call to, and I know that the youth are our biggest audience, is that I dare you, or I challenge you to try and use the systems. I don't know how many times you have called Kidega here, who is our Labor Affairs Secretary at the National Youth Council, to check with him on youth unemployment and what NYC is doing, or how many times you have reached out to your youth member of parliament for your region, or even the member of parliament of your constituency. I think that if we are not giving opportunity for these institutions, if we are not checking them as citizens, then clearly we do not have the moral authority to question them when they misrepresent us. That is my message to the young people out there.
Powerful. Esther.
Thank you, Honorable. Me, I would think that making home better should be a role for each one of us. Uganda is home to all of us. We hate it, we love it. Uganda is home, so we should, as we celebrate the 60 years, we should try in each individual capacity. We should try to make home better in whatever you do in your sector, wherever you are. Do what you're doing with love. Know that you're making home. Somebody else will replace you, but leave it better. Work and leave it better than the way you found it, so that even the next person will work and leave it better, and the cycle will go on, and with the process, we shall have a better Uganda. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you. Yes, Nelson, 30 seconds.
Good task. So, if one thing that next month Uganda should be really reflecting and thinking about, to put out there for discussion, should be to look at what has gone wrong. Because everyone is wondering, what has gone wrong? This is 2030, 2022, under a regime for coming now to 40 years by the end of this tenure. But we are still having the same cries, even more cries than the past. You hear our grandparents now, they are talking of pandagali. Now here we are crying of drones, numberless cars, taking away people from the streets. So we need to ask ourselves, what has gone wrong? And what can we do to have the desired country everybody feels comfort to be in? I believe those who went to the bush, they are in their late ages, and they would want to have a decent retirement. Will they have a decent retirement?
Celebrated retirement.
A decent celebrated retirement when they are not even certain of what is going to happen tomorrow. Whenever you see high voices springing against this, on the street saying something, there must be something that is wrong. You don't see uprisings of the NOP camp and people power movement, and you think that these young people are crazy. They are not crazy. If we had systems in place, well-working relationships with the population and the government, you wouldn't be seeing this kind of troublesome issues. He was talking about, we are not certain. Today we are removing term limits. The following day we are removing age limit. The following time we are saying no need now to consult the public. Let those in parliament vote for you. If they happen to succeed, they will happen. So where you have uncertainty of where the country is heading, that me and even those in the government, they are not so sure. Even when they pretend that they know, in their hearts they don't know. You get what I'm talking about? So it is high time that we need to get on the drawing board. What went wrong? Was what we did in 2004 right? If we say, majority they say no, can we put it back? If what we did in 2017 by removing the age limit wrong, how can we restore it? If we are saying what we did in 1992-95 constitution by giving much power to the president it was wrong, can we diminify the powers of the president? If we think that the power of the judiciary is too much and it is interfering, poking hands in every arm of government is wrong, how can we ensure that we put functioning systems that are independent and function and trusted by the public? Those should be the questions to the people of Uganda and every citizen. For me, I can still urge all young people out there that the ANT has created a space, Alliance for National Transformation, for nurturing a new breed of leaders, leaders of values, values such as transparency, honesty, accountability, equity, fairness, zero tolerance to corruption, the most cancer disease that has eaten up this country. Corruption. It is a space that we have created for everybody who desires to see a good country, a better Uganda, that they envision to have to live in, to have their children, to have a retired place in Uganda, to come and make a contribution at this early stage. Otherwise, let's not wait for whatever will happen. Nothing happens by chance. You get what you negotiate for, and when an opportunity is coming, Ugandans, success happens when preparedness meets an opportunity.
True.
Thank you.
Wow, it has been an amazing couple of minutes and hours, but we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. But above all, we hope that you've learned something from this episode of the Youth Roundtable. Of course, many thanks to you, Comrade Agaba, Comrade Esther, Comrade Seva, and Comrade Peace. Many thanks for sparing time to be on the Youth Roundtable. Of course, to the technical team, thank you for always ensuring that this show airs on time. Well, my own words and opinion is that I'll just paraphrase the words of the late Reverend Desmond Tutu, who said that in whatever you do, in wherever you are, just do right. Eventually that small right will overwhelm the world. I hope that can be a point of reflection for us as we celebrate 60 years of age as a country, but also as young people, how best can we prepare ourselves to, be better placed for the opportunities of the future. Otherwise, this Youth Roundtable says bye-bye. See you next week, same time.